About 200 years ago, when people were first starting to build big cities in America, people went out to the wilderness, to Canada and to North Dakota, to chop down trees in huge, huge numbers. And the camps where these loggers live are very, very lonely, and they're very far from their normal friends and from shops and anything like that. So for entertainment, what people used to do, basically tell lies and exaggerate things. So if a new guy came to a logging camp, two old loggers would start telling stories to each other, pretending not to notice him, until he got interested, and then they would exaggerate the stories more and more. So they made up animals, like they made up the hide behind, which was some kind of creature that hid behind trees and liked to eat loggers, but which they said was revolted by alcohol. So if you got drunk, you wouldn't get eaten by a hide behind. There was the doofus bird, which flew backwards and didn't really care where it was going, only where it had been. It flew backwards and it built its nest upside down, and it tucked itself into an egg at the end of its life. So they made these things up, but the big story that they made up, the big exaggerated story, was the story of Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan was supposed to be like a giant logger, like huge, huge, bigger than the trees. And when Paul Bunyan was born, he was so big as a baby that it took 7 stalks to carry him to his mummy's nursery instead of 1 stalk. He was so big that in a week he was wearing out all his father's clothes, and as he got bigger, he was so big that they had to use cartwheels for buttons on his jacket. What else? He was so big. Paul Bunyan was so big that when he dragged his axe behind him when he was going to work, that made the Grand Canyon. He was so, and in the winter, he worked in the winter so cold, he didn't care about the cold, and he worked in one winter when it was so cold that the cow's milk came out as ice cream. It was so cold that when he spoke, his words froze and fell to the ground. It was so cold. It was so cold that winter that the coffee froze so quickly it was still hot when it was frozen. Paul Bunyan for his breakfast had a frying pan that was so big you couldn't see the other side of the frying pan from this side of the frying pan. And in order to grease the frying pan, what you had to do was tie 2 dead pigs to his feet and skate around the frying pan. So I think they were probably exaggerated claims. I don't think Paul Bunyan was really that big, but an easy way to tell a great story and to give a story life is to exaggerate. And where we are at the moment in lockdown, we exaggerate naturally, don't we? We say, oh, been in lockdown for years. I've spent half my life sitting in this room. I never go out. I don't remember what the world looks like. So this week's writing mission, I would like you to tell me about something ordinary that you're doing, but I'd like you to exaggerate it so much that it's funny, like the claims about Paul Bunyan. And to give you a little steer, I'm going to read you a little bit from the greatest book ever written by anybody ever. That's actually not an exaggeration. This is a book called Framed, and it's by the greatest writer ever, namely Frank Cottrell-Boyce. That's not an exaggeration either. And it's like, sometimes our memory exaggerates things. So exaggeration is a good way of building up a character as well. You could make claims for the character like Paul Bunyan. So this is the hero Dylan describing his dad. My dad, right? Ask anyone this and they'll all say the same. My dad can fix anything. Toyota, Hyundai, Ford, even Nice Tom's mum's Diddy Daihatsu Coppin top speed 106 miles an hour, which is a car about the size of a marshmallow, and you need a pair of tweezers to fix it. And it's not, because exaggeration can make things smaller as well as bigger. And it's not just cars that my dad can fix. Like the time we were at Prestatyn and Minnie wanted to swim, but I wouldn't get in the water because it was so cold, and she kept saying, come on in, it's fine once you get in, and I kept saying no. Then Dad got up and he went to the caravan and he came back with a kettle full of boiling water, and he poured the kettle full of boiling water into the sea, and he said, Dylan, come and test it and tell me, is it all right now, or do you need a bit more hot water? And I got in the sea and said, no, it's fine now, thanks, Dar. Sure now? Sure. It's not too hot, is it? No, it's just right, Dar. Give me a shout. If it gets cold, I can always boil up some more. Then Minnie splashed me, and I splashed her, and we stayed in the water till the sun went down. My dad fixed the sea. Now that is a thing to be admired. My big sister Marie, she never came in the water even after Dad fixed it. She said, have you any idea what seawater can do to your hair? And later on, when we were playing Monopoly in the caravan, she said, did you really think that one kettle of water could warm the whole Irish Sea? I said, not the whole sea, obviously. Just the bit we were swimming in. Yeah, like that would really work, said Minnie. Let me explain the physics. Minnie, said Mum, Euston Road, 3 houses, £270. Typical Mum, cleverly changing the subject to avoid a fight. Obviously, I now know that the kettle did not warm up the entire sea, but that is not the point. I got into the water, that is the point. Dad looked at the situation and he thought, can't do anything about the physics, but I can do something about Dylan. And so he did. I love that passage, and I hope you love it too. And I hope this week you're going to write me a massively exaggerated story about something, claiming something is bigger or lasts longer or is more exciting or less exciting or smaller than you think. Get it to me by Wednesday and we'll read it out on Friday. No, on Wednesday we have a class, a live act class. If you get me your stories by Thursday, we'll read them out on Friday. Until then, until Wednesday, goodbye. Have a great week.